In the top stories, Federation records 2 more COVID-related deaths. More than 150,000 doses of AstraZeneca vaccine in Jamaica to be dumped, and France offers reprieve in post-Brexit fishing dispute with UK. Hello and welcome to the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Today is Tuesday, the 2nd of November 2021. I'm Jason Davis. Nationally, there have been another 2 deaths reported from the Ministry of Health as a result of COVID-19. That brings the national total so far to 25. On Monday's situation report listed 25 deaths, 6 confirmed new cases, making 136 active cases. There have been 2,675 total cases since March of last year. The report also stated that there are 2,514 recoveries. The virtual town hall series Leadership Matters with Prime Minister Dr. the Honorable Timothy Harris continues tonight at 8 o'clock. Prime Minister Harris will be joined by Minister of Health, ICT, Entertainment, Entrepreneurship and Talent Development, the Honorable Akila Byron Nisbet, Accountant General Levi Bradshaw, and Comptroller of the Inland Revenue Department, Edward Gift. The general public is encouraged to tune in as Prime Minister Harris and his guests discuss a number of important matters, including the annual budgetary process. Leadership Matters simulcasts on ZIZ Radio 96.1 FM and other participating radio stations, and is also streamed live on social media platforms, including the Facebook and YouTube pages of the St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service. In other news, the police have charged 26-year-old Tyreek Jones of Wade's Garden for possession of firearm and possession of ammunition. Jones is charged in relation to a Beretta PX4 storm pistol and several rounds of 9mm ammunition that were found in a bag during a security check at the entrance of a night spot in Basse-Terre on October 22. He was charged on October 28 and has been remanded to Her Majesty's prison. We now move to news on the regional scene. More than 150,000 doses of AstraZeneca vaccine will be disposed of in Jamaica. A public health expert is calling on Prime Minister Andrew Holness to immediately introduce vaccine mandates to prevent the country from dumping more vaccines. The doctor also wants the policy to cover the public transport sector. More in this TVJ News report.
The Ministry of Health may be forced to dump over 150,000 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine due to hesitancy among the population. But public health expert Professor Winston Davidson is arguing that vaccine mandate has been on the books since the 1970s and is urging Prime Minister Andrew Holness to exercise his powers now.
It has been having that power for the past 44 years and it has worked. The mandatory exercise for vaccination is the right public health measure, so long as you have the fact that you have the vaccine. And now that we have enough vaccines, AstraZeneca vaccine, we can target those persons who are mostly at risk of getting the disease and who are more also at risk of spreading the disease, and those who work within the public domain, teachers, members of the security forces.
Professor Davidson also wants the government to impose vaccine mandates on transport operators in the private and public sectors.
The persons who are going to transport you in their taxis, in their buses, etc., must be mandated to get their vaccination so that they don't spread it to the passengers and spread it all over the country. We know that we have that sort of Damocles above our head known as the Lambda variant. Don't allow us to get a 4th wave that is going to kill our people again, like we had in the 3rd wave. So every justification, government should go ahead with it.
Chairman of the National Health Fund, Howard Mitchell, in the meantime, says the dumping of another batch of AstraZeneca vaccine is proof of the country's inability to solve problems. The Ministry of Health says more than 40,000 people who are overdue their 2nd dose of the COVID-19 vaccine have not turned up. Earlier this month, close to 60,000 doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine were also dumped, meaning the country has now dumped well over 200,000 doses of vaccine.
Still on the regional scene, Catholics and voodoo worshippers have gathered at cemeteries across Haiti to pay tribute to the dead. All Saints' Day is a Catholic holiday, but it has been heavily influenced by African voodoo traditions. This year's celebrations have taken on special meaning as Haiti struggles with a sharp increase in gang violence, political turmoil, and the lasting effects of August's deadly earthquake. Al Jazeera's John Hendren has more from Port-au-Prince, Haiti.
Follow a parade through Port-au-Prince Cemetery on All Saints' Day this year, and you'll reach the cultural crossroads of a country in crisis. As the faithful make their way through the maze of crypts, a voodoo band leader dances and pours out a mixture of rum and bell peppers to please the spirits.
We are voodoos. Some people believe it's for Satan. We consider it our culture. That's our symbol. Today, it's our ceremony, our birthday celebration.
On this day of remembrance for Catholic saints, believers of two faiths celebrate together, bringing candlelit offerings, flowers, and sacrifices of food to the graves of family and friends. It's a day to leave mementos and beautify the resting places of those they've lost. Celebrants, one with a human skull in hand, oversee a tribute of candles, coffee, and hope in hard times.
I wish for our country to move forward. We want our country to be free, so every young man and women can have a job, so all the voodoo people can have something to do.
It's a rare cause for celebration, nearly 4 months after the assassination of the country's president.
All Saints' Day is a mixture of traditions, Christian and voodoo, rum and reverence, but this year it's happening in a Haiti that's more in chaos than at any time in recent memory.
They come for the ceremony, for much-needed inspiration, and a promise of better times to come.
There is no change without problems, and no change without suffering. Just as a woman has to go through labor pains before everyone can celebrate a baby's birth, even though we have a lot of gangsters and guns in the ghetto, all this will end.
The tributes continue for a second day of celebration on Tuesday, All Souls' Day, a day to celebrate not just the saints, but all the dead, a number that seems to be growing at an alarming rate. John Hendren, Al Jazeera, Port-au-Prince, Haiti.
Internationally, there have been signs of a possible resolution to the dispute between the United Kingdom and France. French President Emmanuel Macron is delaying new customs checks against the UK. A full-blown trade war appears to be looming between the UK and France over fishing rights in the English Channel. France had threatened to impose restrictive new customs checks from Tuesday unless French boats are granted more access to British waters. Al Jazeera's Alexi O'Brien reports.
At the fish market in France's biggest fishing port, they're nervous. Some here say they've already lost nearly 50% of their income after their boats weren't granted a licence to fish in British waters.
What we don't understand is why some boats were given licenses and others weren't. Some of these boats have been fishing in these waters for generations.
The ocean became the latest battleground between the UK and the European Union under a post-Brexit trade deal which came into force this year. It meant both sides could control who could fish in their waters. France accuses the UK of unfairly denying permission to dozens of its vessels. Fishermen in Boulogne-sur-Mer rely on British waters for their catch, but the relationship goes both ways because for the British fishing industry, France is the gateway to Europe and they depend on ports like this for access to the continent. If the UK doesn't resolve the issue, France is threatening to roll out a series of sanctions, including tougher checks on trucks going to and from the UK, and preventing British fishing boats from docking and unloading their catch. The UK says it's considering legal action if the measures go ahead.
Since the announcement of Brexit, we knew there'd be a lot of problems for the fishing industry. What's happening now is not a surprise, and the biggest losers will be the British fishermen and the French fishermen.
And not just them. There's concern here that thousands of jobs could be affected, including those who process the fish that's brought ashore from British boats.
What we want is for everyone to be able to work, for everyone to be able to go anywhere, respecting each other's jobs, for us all to have equal rights and work hand in hand like before.
This city's home to a statue that pays tribute to the close relations between the UK and France, but that relationship's being sorely tested. And as politicians argue over their futures, some in the fishing community feel they're being left out at sea. Alexia O'Brien, Al Jazeera, Boulogne-sur-Mer, Northern France.
Conservative U.S. Supreme Court justices appeared to lean towards allowing a challenge by abortion providers to a Texas law that imposes a near-total ban on the procedure and lets private citizens enforce it. More in this Reuters report.
Oh yay, oh yay, oh yay.
The U.S. Supreme Court on Monday heard oral arguments in two separate challenges to the Texas abortion law that imposes a near-total ban on the procedure, and the justices appeared to lean toward allowing one challenge brought by abortion providers, jumping on the law's unusual design that lets private citizens enforce it, shielding it from being blocked by lower courts.
The entire point of this law, its purpose and its effect, is to find the chink in the armor.
Some of the most pointed questions came from liberal Justice Elena Kagan, who said the Texas abortion law was intended to evade a basic legal principle.
The fact that after, these many years, some geniuses came up with a way to evade the commands of that decision, as well as the command that the even broader principle that states are not to nullify federal constitutional rights. And to say, we've never seen this before, so we can't do anything about it. I guess I just don't understand the argument.
At issue in the challenge brought by abortion providers is not the Texas law's constitutionality, but whether federal courts can hear lawsuits aimed at striking down the law, which was structured so that instead of having state officials enforce the ban on abortions after about 6 weeks of pregnancy, the law lets individual citizens enforce it through lawsuits against providers. The Supreme Court declined to halt the Texas abortion law in September, with 5 of the court's 6 conservative justices in the majority, but there were signs on Monday that some of those 5 conservative justices were reconsidering their positions, including Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who appeared to express interest in points made by Justice Kagan.
Justice Kagan points out there's a loophole that's been exploited here.
Kavanaugh also wondered if states could pass similar laws that could infringe other constitutional rights, including the right to bear arms.
And to put huge penalties to the Chief Justice's hypothetical, say everyone who sells an AR-15 is liable for $1 million to any citizen.
The justices also heard a challenge to the law by the Biden administration, but weren't as receptive, appearing skeptical about whether the U.S. federal government can sue Texas to try to block it. A decision on the Texas abortion law could come quickly. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court will address the constitutionality of abortion restrictions more directly when they hear arguments on December 1st over the legality of a Mississippi law that prohibits abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy.
And now for the weather. Current conditions are cloudy with scattered showers and slight dust haze. Winds are a moderate breeze of 14 miles per hour from the east-northeast. The temperature is 31 degrees Celsius or 87 degrees Fahrenheit. Seas are moderate with waves of 4 to 7 feet, where a small craft advisory remains in effect, particularly for the eastern side of the islands. The weather forecast for St. Kitts and Nevis says today and tonight will be partly cloudy and hazy breezy with a 40% or moderate chance of showers. Sunset today will be at 6:49 p.m., sunrise tomorrow at 5:43 a.m. And that brings us to the end of the ZIZ Midday Newscast. Join us this evening for these stories and more in detail. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Jason Davis.